Hello all, welcome to oratrainings.com. In this Oracle database programming session, we'll discuss about manipulating data, nothing but working on insert, update and delete. Let us get into the objectives of this particular session. After completing this particular session, you should be able to understand how do we describe each DML statement, how do we insert rows into a table, how do we perform update rows in a table, as well as how do we perform deletion of a rows in a table, how do we merge rows in a table, as well as how do we control transaction. Let us get into the next slide. So what is data manipulation language and how it is important? So it is a core part of structured query language, nothing but SQL. And a DML statement is executed whenever we perform adding rows into table, or modifying the existing data, or removing data from the existing table. So whenever you modify, it's all about rows, right? So any table will have a set of rows as well as columns. Whenever you add any row or modify a row or remove a row, this involves a DML statement to be executed. So a transaction consists of a collection of DML statements that form a logical unit of work. So whenever you modify the data, database has to maintain the maintain like integrity of database, nothing but when you update the data, it has to update the data. When you commit the data, it has to be committed to the data, and the data should be available across the users who are using it, right? So let us say when you're trying to remove some row, when you're trying to remove a particular row in a table, data should be, you should the database should be making sure that whenever you delete the row, it has to delete the row, as well as it has to perform the appropriate commit of the data. It has to perform the appropriate commit to the database, nothing but let us say a particular user is saying 50 records, and other user is seeing 75 records without having any restrictions on it, right? So the database has to maintain a proper database, has to maintain all this particular data in the database in a proper manner. Okay, let us get the next slide. Okay, so how do we insert rows into the table? Assume that you have a table and you want to perform insertion of records into the table. What is the syntax involved here? So to insert any record into table, we have to use this particular insert command. Insert into the table name, and here you can mention column name, but it is not mandatory. If at all, if you want to mention column name, you have to mention it. Then values followed by the list of values, like nothing but a table is having 5 columns, so then you should mention 5 values. Let us say if the table is having five columns, but you want to insert only 2 values, remaining column values you don't want to insert, then explicitly you have to mention the column names also. If you don't mention the column name while inserting the record, then make sure that you mention all the values for all the columns. Okay, now here if you observe two examples here, in this one, what are we trying to do is insert into a table name department. We mention 3 column names and we mention 3 values. Similarly, another one here, if you observe insert into departments, so here we have not mentioned any column names, okay, but we mention all the values which are required for the department table. So, and you can also mention a substitution variable, so that what will happen is whenever you execute the statement, it will explicitly ask the value, and the value will be replaced with the variable at runtime. Okay, yeah, so let us perform the insertion of the statement before proceeding further. Okay, I'll just go to my SQL developer. Let us consider the table is to be considered. So let us say I'll just consider the empty table. Okay, now instead of modifying or working on this table, what I'll do is I'll just try to work on another table with a similar table structure. Okay, so maybe you can just see the existing one, xxemp. Yeah, so but it is not having all the columns, right? Or maybe what I'll do is I'll just create another one, create table xxemp. So I'll just say emp07. Okay, as select star from emp, create table. This is my new table name, and what I want to do is I want to create a table based on the existing table. So this particular operation will create the table, as well as it will copy the data from the other table. Okay, so before proceeding further, let me save the data. 1 minute. Now, so check the new table, select star from xxemp07, right? Okay, now it is having all the 14 records which we want to use it. Now what I want to do is I just want to insert a new record here. I want to insert a new record here. So just observe what are the mandatory columns. When you're trying to insert a new record, the mandatory columns has to be provided. Nothing but not null values has to be provided. So here if you observe, I don't have any not null values, nothing but none of the values are mandatory. In this particular table which I created, none of the values are mandatory. So what I can do is I'll just see here, insert into xxemp07, okay, values. How many columns were there? How many columns were there in this one? Let us copy this one, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So there are 8 columns. Okay. Now I don't want to insert anything in any column. I'll just simply insert null. Just see what will happen now. I'll mention 8 nulls. Okay. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Can you see? One row got inserted and all the values in the table are null. Okay. Now just see here. Can you see the last row, 15th row? Okay. I have not mentioned any commit here. Just copy the same table. And what I will do is I will log into the same database. I will log into the same database using another tool. Okay. I'm using a Toad here. Toad is another tool using which we can access the Oracle database. I'll execute here and just observe here. Just observe the data. Okay. Can you see? It shows only 14 records. It shows only 14 records. It is not showing the 15th record. The basic reason is when you are performing insert statement, the data is not committed into the database. So when you're executing any of the DML statement, what Oracle will do is it will allocate a temporary space for this particular user who is executing from this particular tool. Nothing but here, if you observe, let me show you one particular table where you can find out good amount of information. Just observe this one. Select star from v $session. So this particular table or a view will have the information about who all logged into this particular database. Now, in my case, my username is Oracle 17 is my Windows name. I mean to say like my username with using the operating system name. I mean to say like in this operating system Windows, I logged in with the username Oracle 17. Okay. So what I'll do is just search with Oracle 17 as a username. Now just see, 1 minute, there's somewhere wrong. This is Oracle 17. Yep, it is Oracle 17. Not username. There is a column called OS user. Okay, just see that. Yeah, OS user. Okay, OS user. Now can you see? You got 2 records. Okay. Now it got the SID, serial number, many other things. Just ignore them, but just see few things. And now here, if you observe, there is one particular row which is with the status active. Other one is status inactive. Okay. Now see which is status active as well as which is status inactive. OS user is this one, process is this one, mission is this one, terminal. Yeah. If you see here, the terminal or the program, right? SQL developer is active and the Toad program is inactive because now my current cursor is on the SQL developer window. Similarly, if you execute the same statement on the Toad, you'll see the Toad as active, SQL developer as inactive. Okay. That is how it works. Now, why I'm telling this one is like now Oracle database maintains a session for each connection to the database. Okay. Now the data which I executed, it is available with this particular session and it is not yet committed to the main database. I mean to say like it is not yet committed to the table. It is just available in a temporary space until unless you perform a commit that will not be available to the all the other users who are accessing it. Now what I'll do is I'll just perform a commit. Okay. I'll perform a commit. Now what I'll do is I'll just consider the same statement and execute from the Toad. I'll execute from the Toad before executing my, yeah, just observe this one. Now one is active, other one is inactive. And the first one is active, right? Here, if you observe, Toad is active. Toad is active and SQL developer is inactive. Now just see the number of records which are available in the EMP table. And you should see the 15th record also here. Okay. So now what we have done, we have mentioned commit. We have mentioned commit and we could see the empty row which we inserted. We could see the empty row which we inserted, right? So this is how when you're trying to insert the data, make sure that you perform the appropriate commit or rollback whenever it is required. Okay, until unless you commit it, the data will not be available. Okay, now let us try to insert only few columns. Let us I want to insert only 3 columns. Which columns? If you observe, let us say if you want to insert 3 columns, just see here. Let us say I want to insert only 3 columns. I don't want to insert the remaining columns. Then see whether it works or not. What it is telling? Not enough values. Until unless, if you want to insert only 3 values, you have to clearly mention which columns are there, which columns you want to insert, because it doesn't know, right? It doesn't know how to map it. So then we have to explicitly map emp number, ename, comma job. Let us say I'll mention this one. Emp number is, let us say 777. Ename is Sriram, and job will say IT. Okay. Now make sure that you mention the single quotes properly. Okay. Now what it is telling? Insert into emp number, ename, and job. And what it is telling? Not enough values, right? No, sorry. This one, right? One row inserted. It got inserted. Just check the data. Can you see this one? The last record. We got the data, right? Once you perform the commit, or you can perform the shortcut for the commit is this one. You can just click on this one. The data will get committed, and you can also verify from the Toad. Now you should see the 16th record also. You should be able to see the 16th record also. Just see the record count, 16 records. Sriram IT. Okay. Now let's get back to slide. So we have seen how to insert all the columns or only few columns, right? Now let us see another one. How do we copy the data from another table? How do we copy data from another table or nothing but row? Let us say if you want to copy only few rows, how do we do it, right? Let us see this example. Let us say I'll create another table, create table XX EMP data, which will have only 2 columns, EMP number, ename, varchar2 140. Now I just created a table with the name EMP data. In this particular table, I just want to get the ename and EMP from the EMP table. I want to get ename and EMP number from this particular table. Okay, where job is equal to clerk. I don't want to get all the data. I want to get all the employees whose job is clerk into this new table XX EMP data. So what do? Insert into XX EMP data. Okay. And what is the syntax? Insert into, mention the table name, mention the column names, and then just simply mention the query. Don't mention the value clause here. Don't mention the values keyword here or clause. Mention the column names of your table. What are the column names? It is just similar to columns, EMP number, ename, and after that, just mention the query. Okay, just mention the query. See here, 4 rows inserted. And let us say if I try to execute the same query from the Toad, will it work? Just see here. Okay, it is not giving an error, but it is not giving any data. Okay, means that when you perform a DDL command, nothing but when you're creating a table, it's nothing but a DDL command, right? DDL commands are all auto committed. Nothing but data definition language commands are auto committed. It doesn't need to explicitly mention commit. Okay, that is why when you're trying to execute the select star from XXEMP data, even when you have not committed, it is still not giving any error, but it is not giving any data, right? Even though it is having 3 records or maybe 4 records, right? If you see how many records were there in this one, select star from, there are 4 records from the SQL developer terminal, but when I execute the same thing from the Toad terminal, it is not giving any data, right? The reason is it is not yet committed. Now just commit it and try to see from Toad. You should be able to see the 4 records. Okay, this is how the commit works. Now we have seen how do we insert the rows into the table using a select clause. Okay, let us see other one. How do we perform update on a specific set of rows on a specific set of columns, right? How do we update them? So this is syntax here. You can mention update, the table name. You have to mention set clause, a column name followed by, like if at all if you want to update multiple columns, that should be separated by comma, like a column value. And then you can also mention where condition, whether you want to update all the rows in a table or a specific rows in a table where a condition is satisfied. You can update a single row at a time, or more than one row at a time, or zero rows at a time. Okay. if where clause is if where clause is omitted, all the rows are modified. Okay. You can also use subqueries. Now let us see some examples on this particular update statement. Okay. Now let us say update xx emp data. Okay. Set emp number is equal to 1000, where emp number is equal to 7369. What will happen now? Wherever the employee record is 7369, wherever the employee record is 7369, it will get updated with the emp number 1000. Can you see the last one row updated, one rows updated? Okay. Now just see the data in the query. You should be able to see the 1000 here, right? Or let us say, what I'll do is I'll just ignore this where condition. I'll just comment this where condition. If you try to execute, what will happen? It will update the 4 records. It has to mention 4 records now, right? It is updated 4 records. And if you just see the data, you should see the latest data. Now let us say I'll try to re-execute, and here I'll mention 2000. Can you see? Again, it got 4 records updated. See the data. And one more thing, I have not yet committed. I can just simply click on rollback. Okay, click on rollback and see the data now. See the data in this EMP table. Yes, I got my data back. I performed rollback. Now, let us write one more condition so that no records will be updated, where EMP number is equal to -1. There is no record in this particular table with the employee record -1. Now, what it has to mention, update will never give an error. I mean to say, like if it is unsuccessful in updating the record, it will not give any error. It simply says 0 rows updated. That's it. Now, if you see the EMP data, there is nothing, right? There is no change you will observe. Okay. Now, using update statement, you can see that we have seen that you can update a single row, you can update all the rows, or you can update 0 rows, right? Okay. Now, coming to the next one, deleting rows using a column. You cannot delete a single column. You can drop a column. Let us say if you want to drop a column, you can drop a column. You can modify a column data type, but you cannot delete a single column. Nothing but it's called drop. It's not delete. Okay. Or you can set the value of a column. You can, let us say for a given column, you want to set the value as null. That you can do it using the update statement. Okay. Now coming to the delete. How do we delete the records? Like we have to mention delete statement. Delete, you can mention from clause, or you can ignore it. Delete table, and you can mention the where condition if at all, if you want to if you want to delete only specific rows. If you don't mention where condition, what will happen? It will delete all the records. If you mention where condition, it will delete only the records which are getting satisfied with the where condition. Okay. Now let us see the example now. Let us say delete from. Make sure that when you're trying to perform insert, update, or delete, work on the other tables. I mean to say, like work on some other tables which will not affect your particular current like a current your organization data. Okay. You create your own table and work on it. Or let us say if you have some working table in which you have your particular development information, don't try to work on that particular table. What you can do, just simply create a replica of it. Now let us say in our example, what we have done, I'm not trying to modify my EMP table, because that is my golden table, which I don't want to modify anything in that. So what I've done is I just created a replica of it, right? XXEMP07. So similarly, what you can do is just create a replica of it, and you perform all your particular POCs on that. Now let us say if I try to delete from data from this one, what will happen? Delete from a particular table, right? You can just mention like this. Now it says 4 rows deleted. You can roll back and you can see all the data. Let's see again. Let us say I'll delete the data. Now if you try to see the data, nothing will be available. But actually data is not yet deleted, nothing, but it is not yet committed, right? If you perform a rollback, you should be able to see the data again. Okay. Now let us say I want to delete only a specific row where ename is equal to Smith. I want to delete. Let me write in a different statement so that we'll have the note of it. Where ename is equal to Smith. Now what will happen? Wherever the data is matching with the name Smith, wherever the employee name is matching with Smith, that specific record will be deleted, right? Only one row deleted now. One row deleted. And if you try to re-execute, you should see only 3 records. Okay. Now, as of now, we have not committed. If you commit it, then the data will get persisted in the database. Else, it will be rollback. Okay, I'll just simply perform a rollback. Either you can mention delete. Now let us see if you don't mention delete, you can mention from is not mandatory. Okay, I'll try to re-execute again. See, just see this one. From is not mandatory. There is no error. Okay. Now coming back to the next point in our slide, database transaction. So far, what all we have seen? We have seen insert, update, and delete. Okay, and also we have seen a simple statement of creation also. A database transaction, we call them like whenever you perform any execution in the database, we call it as a database transaction if you're trying to perform the following. It can be creation of a table, it can be insert, or like it can be insert, update or delete, or it can be a commit or rollback. Nothing but DDL statement, DCL statement, as well as DML statement. So here if you observe the sequence, I mentioned it as DML statements, nothing but insert, update, delete. DDL statement like create, alter, drop. DCL nothing but like a save point, rollback, commit. Okay, so the transaction begins whenever you generally, like, let us say in our case, assume that I performed an insertion. So what will happen? The transaction starts from there. The transaction begins when the first DML statement is executed, and it will end when. Now let us say I perform the insert statement. Until unless I perform a commit or rollback, the data still will be available only in the temporary table space. Let us say I perform commit, then the data, the temporary data which is available in the transaction, that will get committed in the database, right? So that is what it says about. That is what a transaction is all about. You perform a particular statement, you performed a DDL or a DML, or let us say, assume that DML statement, I performed an insertion. Until unless you perform a commit or rollback, the date that particular transaction is still a pending state, right? Nothing but data will not be updated, deleted, or the data will not be inserted into the table, into the database until unless you perform the commit or rollback. That is what it is saying about. Okay, so like when you implement the database, there are many things will occur, right? Either assume that like you perform the insertion, maybe like your network got crashed, or your database got crashed, or maybe your tool got crashed. There can be a number of chances, right? That is the reason you have this kind of a transaction commit which is there, so that like you will not like you will not corrupt the database, right? Like it's not that there is no partial commit, either you commit it or don't commit it. That's what it's all about. You can't insert only 5 records, then it will stop something again, it will give an error kind of thing. That's not, that will never happen. Okay, now coming to the next slide, explicit default feature. So there are some set of scenarios where like you want to consider the default value in a particular column. Like in some of the records in Oracle, if you observe, like you'll have a column called who columns. The values for them to be inserted by default. Okay, assume that you have in your particular table you have a column called creation date. Whenever you insert a record, the creation date should be populated with the sys date. So like in this scenario here, if you observe, right, like if you omit a column to be inserted and if you set the default value to be inserted, then you can use this particular feature. Default keyword can be used it. Okay, so what are the transaction control statement? These are the four things: commit, save point, rollback, and rollback to a particular save point name. So these set of things we cannot mention in a normal SQL queries. We can mention a commit or rollback, but the save point and rollback to save point we cannot mention in the SQL statement. We have to use in conjunction with the PL/SQL. Nothing but when you write a PL/SQL program, there you can mention a save point name and you can mention rollback to save point name. There it makes a sense, right? In our case, as of now, we are just writing a simple independent statements, so it is not that much differentiation you'll make here. So as of now, we have seen the commit and rollback, but in future we'll try to see the save point as well as rollback when we discuss about the PL/SQL statements. Okay, implicit transaction processing. We have seen this set of features. There are a few things, right? Like the DDL or DCL, they are auto committed, right? Where like the transaction processing will be done implicitly. It doesn't need to explicitly say that okay, this particular statement is completed, you perform a commit. When you execute a DDL, that's it. Like the statement will be executed. It means that the definition of the object will be updated or created in the database at that point. That's it. If the creation statement is successful, then the database object will be committed, nothing but created in the database, and it will be available to all the user at that point of time. There is no explicit commit required. There is no a temporary transaction maintained in this kind of scenario. Okay, of course it is maintained internally, but if it is successfully created, then the respective object will get updated in the database at that point, at that instant, I can say. And coming to state of the data, we have seen the example, right? Like when you're trying to perform the insertion or update or deletion, what is happening? The database, the data will not be committed until unless you perform a commit. Nothing but what will happen? What will be the state of the data when you consider before commit? So here, if you observe, let us say, consider that we have two tools we have used, right? One is SQL Developer tool, another one is a Toad tool. When we executed the data in the Toad, until unless a commit or rollback is not done, the data, the updates or deletion, the updates could not be seen by other user who logged in using Toad, or maybe any other user who is logged into the same database, right? Because what will happen is the previous state of the data can be recovered. The current user can review the results of the DML operation. Other user cannot view the results of the DML statement until unless you perform a commit, right? And before commit, what can happen? Until unless you perform the commit, the updates of the data will not be affected, right? After commit, what will happen? Any user who is using this particular table can see the latest data. So that is what this particular state of the data means. Nothing but when you have a DML statement, make sure that you perform the commit properly so that the other user who is working on the same table or same data can see the latest data. Okay. After rollback, what will happen? The temporary data which is pending to be updated will be flushed back. Nothing but it will be released, it will be cleared from the cache of the database, and the logs will be released. Okay. You can have a transaction level rollback or a statement level rollback also. Okay. Read consistency, like a Oracle database follows a particular consistency rule mechanism, so that the readers should not wait for the writers, or writers should not wait for the readers. Let us say you have written a program which is inserting the data. Other developer has written a program which is reading the data. Assume that parallelly insertion is happening, parallelly reading is happening. So the reader should not wait for the writing purpose, or writer should not wait for the reading purpose, right? Because I just want to fetch the data. Why should I wait for your insertion? And he want to insert it. Why will he wait for the other user who is reading it, right? That is what the read consistency all about, right? That is why you have an explicit commit feature. Like until unless you perform the commit, the other user cannot see the data, because he executed, the other user is just fetching the data. Whatever it is available in the database which is committed to the database, he will read it. And your insertion statement, until unless you commit the data, he cannot see the latest data. He will see what are the data which is available at that point of time, which is a committed data. That's it. Okay. And all these features are by default available in the database. As a developer, it doesn't need to consider any of these particular things. It doesn't need to worry about, like, you are inserting some data, what will happen to the other user who is reading the data. You doesn't need to bother about all these things. These are the implicit database features which are available by default in the many of the database, not just Oracle database. All these particular features are available by default in all the databases. Okay. And so far, what all we have learned, we have just seen this. We have seen some of the commands, the DML commands, and we have seen some of the control transaction commands. Okay, insert, update, delete, commit, save point, as well as rollback. So hopefully you understood about the DML statements as well as control statements. Thank you.